Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're more than halfway through what has already been a fantastic day with fantastic speakers. And of course, Ben's done a great job of introducing all the speakers today and comparing the event. But he's up next, and I thought it's only fair that somebody introduce him, because he's a great voice in our community. He's been doing some amazing work for well over 11 years now, and that work is ongoing with another book just about to come out. Well, actually on sale over there. So you guys are the first to get that. And with some yet more brilliant information for us today. And he's a really good personal friend of mine, and one of the first people I met when I got involved in the conferences and meeting new people, and he's been really kind to me. So it gives me really great pleasure. Please show your appreciation for Mr. Ben Emlyn-Jones.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice. Thanks very much, Gemma. That was lovely. Thanks for that great introduction. And thank all of you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming here today. It's, as Gemma said, this is already shaping up to be a fantastic conference, and we're only halfway through the first day. It's really great. And thanks to Taj for organising this. I mean, you just have a look at the stage and see how amazing this is, and it's the first of its kind. That's really good. Hopefully there'll be more. Well, today I'm going to talk about something called SETI and UFOs. Now, SETI stands for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So we're going to play a little game here. Now, there's a secret message encoded into this title slide. But it's kind of a secret message, or a sort of hidden sort of image, a hidden point in this picture. And it's not a subliminal image of Nick Pope's face, before anyone asks. But have a think about it, see if you can spot it. But you may be wondering what SETI is and what it has to do with UFOs, but all shall be revealed, because I want to start off with by talking about a very, very simple and basic fact. We are not alone. That is indisputable. It is absolutely beyond all argument. Physically, it is possible. Technically, it is possible that we are alone in this universe. That is undeniable. It cannot be completely ruled out, but it's so statistically unlikely that we're alone in this universe that it's to argue that we are means pretending that everyone can win the national lottery 5 weeks in a row. It is literally that absurd. It's literally technically, physically, it's possible for everybody to win the national lottery 5 weeks in a row. That is physically possible. There's nothing that breaks the laws of physics to say that. But it is so beyond statistical probability. It's so above the ceiling, the cutoff point of statistical acceptance that no one really takes it seriously. So we, somewhere out there, and indeed, I don't believe they're just out there. I believe they're down here. There is a non-human intelligence in this universe. Now, what is SETI? Now, SETI is not to be confused with SETI, which you may be familiar with if you study the work of Dr. Stephen Greer of the Disclosure Project. SETI is something very different, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, this is not a single scientific project. It's more a collective name for a scientific movement, a collection of many, many different scientific projects who work towards the same goal. That is, locating and detecting and identifying non-human intelligences within the universe. Now, the methods they use are quite interesting. And in a strange way, even though their goal is essentially the same as that of ufology, with the study of unidentified flying objects, there is a gulf between them which I think needs to be understood. Because the two, there's almost no overlap between the two sides. Now, I just want to show you a little something, because this is just a very short video clip to illustrate what I mean when I say that we can't possibly be alone. It is this kind of image, what you're about to see, which inspires the work of the SETI movement. Just illustrates how big, see, this is the universe. This is the image of the Himalayas, Tibet. This is the Earth, which is pretty big, isn't it? I mean, it feels big when we're on it. You travel to these various places. You travel across the world. You've got to get on a plane. You've gone somewhere really exotic. That's our entire planet where we live. Every single one of us, with just a couple of thousand exceptions, has never ever left that little blue dot there, that little blue ball. Amazing, isn't it? And we are exploring space. We are looking into space. We have spacecraft. We've sent craft into space. I'm going to leave aside the secret space program for this discussion, which Andrew I know talks a lot about that. I'm going to leave that aside and just pretend that it doesn't exist, just for the sake of making the point I'm making in this particular video. But even leaving aside that, we have explored space using conventional, publicly acknowledged space missions. Those are satellites, there are rockets, there are unmanned craft that have gone way out into the outer planets. That's our entire planet there. And as soon as you get to a point where you can see the entire moon's orbit, our own planet becomes almost invisible. It's so tiny. This is the inner planets of the solar system. Mars there. See how far away Mars is? That's our entire solar system, all the planets orbiting the sun. And already, the sun and its surroundings is starting to look like just another star. These are those radio transmissions that we've been radiating for just over a century. That's how far into space they've got. This is how big space is. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way. And the Milky Way itself is, once you get out to the scale of the galactic clusters, the galaxies themselves look like stars. From that distance, they're just like singular stars. And the entire observable universe, 49 billion light years across. It's about 13 million years old, but even we can only see a small part of this. This is only a small part of what exists. We don't know how much exists beyond this. And that's even leaving aside things such as parallel universes and other dimensions that exist beyond what we can see within this particular space, time continuum, as Tony was talking about. So we are not alone. We cannot be alone. It's not possible for us to be alone in that. And I'll explain exactly why I think that in a minute. Now, within that, even within our galaxy, I'll explain exactly why I think even the experts who studied this say that we don't have to go as far as the edge of the universe to find other intelligent life, that it's going to be much closer statistically, simply by statistical analysis. But we may be dealing with a level of technology. We know that technology progresses very, very fast once humans started developing technology. We're barely over a century from the first flight, but already we're designing very sophisticated spacecraft, even, like I said, leaving aside the secret space program. And it's possible that there are other craft, there are other beings out there in the void, out in space, that have reached a level of technology higher than us and can build much more sophisticated spacecraft. Scientists admit this. Spacecraft are possibly capable of traveling the vast distances between the stars and maybe visiting other planets on other stars. Do you notice this? This looks like some kind of a new kind of shuttlecock for a badminton game. But this is actually a spacecraft. It's a very sophisticated spacecraft designed by the British Interplanetary Society, part of something called Project Daedalus. This is a craft which is perfectly designed. It has been designed, it could be built now, and it is capable of reaching Proxima Centauri, the nearest star. It's designed for a journey to the nearest star from the sun, Proxima Centauri, roughly 4.5 light years away. And it could get there within about 50 years. We could build this now if we wanted to. We could get to another star. There may be aliens around Proxima Centauri. We could go and visit them. And if we can do it, other creatures out there can do it to us. They can come and visit us. It's not absurd to say that. It's perfectly scientifically logical for us to claim that that is the case. So my big question, and the whole point of what I'm going to talk about today, is why is it when evidence emerges to suggest that that has happened already, the people involved with SETI, they just will not accept it? So where does SETI come from? Well, the movement really started around about 1960 and it can be pinpointed to the work of this man. This is a chap called Frank Drake, who's kind of the godfather of SETI. And he held a meeting. And well, first of all, he started off in 1960 by pointing this radio telescope. This is the Howard E. Tatel radio telescope at the Green Bank Observatory in West Virginia, USA. And he pointed this at the two stars, Torchetti and Epsilon Eridani. And he did it because these were very sun-like stars. These are stars which effectively are the same kind as the sun. And so he wanted to see if maybe, because they're like the sun, they might have developed intelligent life in the same way that the sun has. He didn't receive any. He got a false alarm from a passing aircraft, and he thought at first it was a signal, but it was actually something closer to home. And that is a problem. That is one of the problems with SETI, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But he was hooked. His mind was captivated. And in 1961, he held a meeting at a place called... he actually held a meeting here at the Green Bank Observatory of a group of the world's leading experts, and he called it, rather esoterically, the Order of the Dolphin. I don't know why he called it that. I don't know if they wore masks and long gowns, or they pranced around naked. I'm not sure. But that's what he called it. But anyway, he invited some of the world's best minds to assist him in designing the SETI basically the SETI program. How would you search for extraterrestrial intelligence? Among these people were Peter Lilly, who's a very famous biologist who studied an awful lot about the origins of life on Earth. Also, Otto Struber, the great mathematician, was also sitting around the table in this room. A third member of this team, there was actually about 15 of these guys sitting around this table. A third member that I think we should mention is someone called Carl Sagan, who was a young astronomer at the time. And his name is going to come up again because he's one of the most important people in this story. And after a lot of quibbling, a lot of discussion over many, many days, they decided to speculate based on what they knew, the amount they knew about the universe, and about how they thought it was likely, how many contactable civilizations there were in the Milky Way galaxy. They had to focus on the Milky Way galaxy alone simply because of distance and simply because they needed to cut down the odds a bit, because what I just showed you was so huge, the universe is so huge. So they thought, let's just deal with the Milky Way galaxy alone and focus on that. And they came up with this very famous equation. It's known as the Drake equation, where n is the number of contactable civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. And the way you work this out is by these factors. R is the rate of star formation. How quickly stars emerge out of interstellar gas and dust and start nuclear fusion and basically become stars and as we know them today. Fp is the number of those stars which develop solar systems, that is, planets orbiting around them. Now, in those days, they had absolutely no idea what that was. All they knew is that the sun had a solar system. They had absolutely no idea how many other stars had solar system. Since then, we've learned that Fp is actually about 70%. It's a huge figure. The vast majority of stars do have orbiting bodies. Now, the next one is Ne. Ne is the number of those planets that orbit these stars which have Earth-like conditions. They're in what's called the Goldilocks zone. They're not too hot, they're not too cold. They have the kind of gases in their atmosphere, and they have water, and they have all the right ingredients for life as we know it, Jim. Fe is the number of those planets. And I should point out Ne is about 17%, 1/7. So that's, again, it's very, very high. The Earth-like planets are not uncommon in our galaxy. In fact, they've already discovered about 20 of them. And Fe is the number of those planets where life actually emerges. So you see, they're trying to narrow down the odds as much as possible. They're trying to be as conservative as possible here with things like this. Now, an Fi is the number of those life forms that become intelligent. They develop a brain or equivalent of a brain to think and to know the world around them. Fc is the number of those intelligent civilizations that develop the capability through technology to communicate using electromagnetic rays. Electromagnetic radiation, because the whole SETI program really emerges out of our ability to control electromagnetic radiation, which barely began at the beginning of the late 19th century, early 20th century, in terms of actually radio, people like Marconi. It really dates back to that. So Fc is the number of those intelligent life forms that are actually capable of communicating. Now, I think there should be another factor after this, which I call FM, but I'll come back to that in a minute, okay? Because I think there's a missing piece of this equation. L is the length of time that those civilizations exist. They exist to the point where they actually do communicate. You actually do get communication. So basically, how long they last, as Sagan said before, they destroy themselves with their own technology. Maybe they develop weapons and things like that. And at the end of this long meeting, the Order of the Dolphin concluded, roughly, there were about 10,000 contactable civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. That's within about 100,000 years of the Earth. There are 10,000 contactable civilizations. And even if you whittle this down as ruthlessly as possible and be the ultimate curmudgeon conservative, you get a figure of 80. And if you're more sort of like a bit more lax, you can come up with a figure as high as 800,000 within our galaxy alone. It was quite a moment, it really was. It was quite a spectacular moment. And one of the factors that came into the Drake equation is the work of this guy. This is Harold Urey. Now, Harold Urey, together with his friend Stanley Miller, his colleague Stanley Miller, did an experiment at Chicago University in 1952, which I think is very, very important in this story. They decided to try and create artificial life, and they did it using this technique here. This is basically a chemistry set here in which you have, within this closed system here, you have a few basic chemicals of life, which it simulates the environment you find on Earth in the early days. There's hydrogen, there's ammonia, there's water, there's a few other simple chemicals which scientists believe existed on Earth before life emerged. You have a heat source there, the bottom there, and there's an electric arc, and that simulates lightning bolts, because it's believed that lightning bolts were very, very important in the creation of biochemistry, which led to life. And what's amazing is that after running this experiment for just a few years, they came up with various substances that were created in this system, which includes things such as various carbon compounds that maybe you're familiar with photosynthesis. There was some of the elements of DNA, some amino acids, hints that this was leading towards possibly what you find with life. And this led to a very, very important understanding of life, because we often hear the phrase "the miracle of life." I know that there's all kinds of religious mythology about the beginnings of life. How God breathed it into lumps of clay and things like that. And it's considered a miracle. Even in the post-religious age, people talk about the miracle of life. But in fact, life is not a miracle. Life is completely scientifically explicable. It's been studied more carefully than any other factor in the universe. And a lot of work's been done to work out how photosynthesis works, DNA, proteins. Life is understood. And what we know about life is it tends to emerge. Wherever it emerges, it takes hold and it never lets go. Wherever it is, it'll stay there. And what Stanley Miller and what Miller and Urey proved was that life, it can emerge where you'd expect it to be. In any environment, it will come about. So we shouldn't be surprised to find life all over the universe. We shouldn't be at all surprised that wherever we go, where conditions are right, life will emerge. And once it emerges, it starts evolving. It starts changing. Simple life begets complex life. And also people like Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe, who's discovered that there's actually life in space. But that's a big topic. But there's something called panspermia, which refers possibly to life spreading everywhere through space itself. The universe is alive. It's as much alive as a rainforest. This chap's called Carl Sagan. Now, he's one of these pop scientists. Now, pop scientists vary a lot in quality, and some of them are nicer than others. There's some pretty awful ones these days. But this guy was one of the better ones, actually, because he firstly knew a lot. He had a way of communicating, and so he became a TV star. He also wrote a book in 1966 called Life in the Universe, which really captured the public's imagination and popularized the idea of the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, in 1985, he wrote a novel called Contact, which was made into a film in 1997 by Robert Zemeckis, starring Jodie Foster. And this is a really, really good film because this is a speculative piece of speculative fiction, a bit like my own books, which it toys with the idea of what would happen if we contacted something out there, something I think is going to happen. It was an excellent film. Now, SETI today is very, very, contrary to how it's portrayed in the film and in the book, it's portrayed as something a bit fringe. The main character, Ellie Arroway, she's regarded pretty much as an outsider in the scientific world. That's not accurate. In truth, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is completely mainstream, and a lot of very, very respectable and mainstream, normal establishment scientists are behind it. And there's a lot of money being poured into it too. A lot of very, very big equipment is being used in the search. This here is the Very Large Array. It's the Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array in New Mexico, USA. Now, each of these antennae you see before you are 82 feet high, and there's 27 of these. It's a very, very powerful communications and detection system. And it has been used for the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, in the book, and in the film, it's used as well, but there's all kinds of fuss about it because the other scientists don't like it. But in fact, it's completely acceptable to use this to search for intelligent signals from beyond the Earth. Now, the problem with SETI is not so much the detection that's the problem, it's actually the processing of the data, because we're dealing with a universe which is so huge. And there's so much radio information out there, so much radiation on all wavelengths, on all frequencies, on all amplitudes, throughout the entire celestial sphere, completely coming into the Earth, from all kinds of things, from stars, from pulsars, from clouds of dust. Everything is radiating continuously. And so the problem of listening for that signal from another planet and all that radio noise is a bit like listening out for a whisper in a hurricane. And it's even worse than that, because it's actually more like listening out for a whisper in a hurricane in a rock concert venue. Because the Earth itself is a massive radiator of radio noise. Really, the biggest problem with SETI is actually sorting out things that are coming from out there from things that are down here. And in fact, the first SETI experiment in 1960, Drake actually was initially confused because an aircraft flew over the antenna and was transmitting a signal, and Drake thought for a moment it might be coming from Torchetti or Epsilon Eridani. So the need for vast computer databases of enormously powerful processing systems is necessary for SETI. It's quite likely that if there's any detectable signal out there, we've already got it on the databases. It's waiting on magnetic disks and tapes to be processed. So we've already detected it, probably. We're just waiting for it to be sorted out. And they've even asked ordinary people to help. There's this thing called SETI at Home. I don't know if you ever subscribe to this, any of you, but you actually have a system where you use your own home computer when it's on downtime to help process this radio data. They'll send you a chunk of radio data, and while the computer's doing it's like a screensaver. It just goes through this data and processes it, looking for intelligent signals, and it reports back to SETI whether you found it. And I think success is inevitable. It is literally going to happen. It's only a matter of time. These are potentially habitable exoplanets. Now, an exoplanet is a planet which orbits another star apart from the Sun. We all know about the ones that orbit the Sun. Apart from Earth, there's Jupiter and Mars. These planets orbit other stars, and they are detected. They can be detected by using various methods, which I'll talk about. But up to 17% of the planets so far detected, of the 70% of all the stars, possibly have Earth-like conditions. So we could literally have, there could be loads of Earths out there with Earth-like life. Now, on the subject of false alarms, there's been a few of those. Now, this is one of the earliest. This is Susan Jocelyn Bell, who was a radio astronomer. And in 1967, she was working at the Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope. And she picked up what she called LGM, Little Green Men. It was a regular radio pulse coming from deep in the universe. Now, it turned out it was actually a pulsar, which is a form of neutron star, which radiates a signal in a very, very narrow beam as it rotates, and it rotates very fast. So you get this pulsing effect, where if you're in the path of the beam. But at the time, she and her colleagues literally really did think that we might be looking at an intelligent signal from out there in the universe. Go forward 10 years, and there's another issue. There's another event which may not be so much a false alarm. But now what happened here, I don't know how clearly you can see that on this screen, But someone called, there's a Dr. Larry Elner on the 14th of August 1977, picked up a signal. And he picked up this signal here. And you can't really make much of these figures unless you're familiar with radio astronomy. But this little row of digits here is very, very important. It shows an intelligent signal coming from beyond the Earth. And he was so amazed, he wrote the word wow. He encircled it and wrote the word wow. This has become known as the wow signal. Now, what's interesting about this particular signal, it's on what's called the hydrogen line. Frank Drake began to, as part of this meeting in 1961, at the Order of the Dolphin, he suggested that if we're dealing with creatures and we want to know what kind of signals to look for, he suggested that it should be the frequency and wavelength of hydrogen at its lowest level. He said that that's the signal that they would use. This is the kind of frequency that they would use, the aliens, because they didn't know basically what channel we were listening on. He says, if you've got to meet some friends somewhere and you don't know where they're going to meet, you have to work out in advance where you think they're going to be. And so he said, well, the aliens would use the hydrogen channel because that's the most simplest, obvious thing to do. But again, I wonder if that's true, and I'll say a bit more about that later. But anyway, this was on the hydrogen channel, and so there was a big fuss made about this, but it's never been repeated. The wow signal has never, ever been repeated. It came from an area in the constellation of Sagittarius. Don't know exactly where. But there's a guy called Professor Antonio Pares who thinks it was two comets colliding. I don't know, it's possible. The same can also be said for the Lorimer burst. Now, this is much more recent. This was 2011 this was discovered. Dr. Duncan Lorimer of West Virginia University and his student, Bob Nowotny, discovered something very similar to the wow signal. And this was repeated. They've discovered a dozen of these so far, and no one knows where they're coming from. There was some speculation about what they might be. They thought it might be some kind of natural object. There was even talk about maybe the microwave in the cafeteria at the university was generating the signal. that sort of thing has happened, believe it or not. This is what I mean by being in a rock concert venue. But that was ruled out, and it remains a mystery. But what about visual astronomy? Good old-fashioned telescopes, just looking, no radio. We talk about visible light. There's a place for that as well in terms of SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. This is the Kepler Space Observatory. It's one of the most powerful tools for looking for planets out there in the universe that has ever been invented. Now, a couple of years ago, they came across something very, very interesting. A signal came through from a star called KIC 8462582. Catchy little name, I know. But since then it's been nicknamed Tabby Star because of the leader of the scientific team that discovered it, Dr. Tabitha Boyajian, or discovered the strange anomalous effects of it. Because she authored a paper called Where's the Flux? Although that could stand for something else. They were so amazed. You see, Kepler actually hunts a lot of the planets I've just been showing you, these exoplanets. And the way they detect these exoplanets is through eclipsing. As they point the telescope at a star, and every so often, the light dims slightly from the star because it's eclipsed by an object that's orbiting it. And you get like a regular pattern because the star is orbiting in a regular orbit, just like the Earth does once per year, and you get this regular dimming, and that indicates that there's a large object orbiting the planet orbiting the star in a regular pattern, and that's how Kepler detects these objects. And when you do that, you also get different signals, so they can detect things like different chemicals coming, which actually are on this body and things like that. It's very, very interesting indeed. Now, the thing is, this particular star, Tabby Star, had irregular and very, very deep decreases in its lighting, in the level of its light. And there was a big mystery about why this was. They thought it might be a cloud of comets or something like this, but then they realized it was the wrong type of star. And eventually, they had to admit it could be something artificial. Now, Dr. Tabitha Boyajian actually did a TED talk, and she said things like, we must not jump to conclusions about aliens, she said. We must always leave that possibility to the last. We must look for other explanations first. I mean, it's obvious she was desperately trying to avoid being labelled crazy. She really, really wanted not to be associated with people like us. It's pretty obvious. Quite amusing to watch as she tries to deny this stuff. But even she had to admit in the end, this could be a Dyson sphere. This is the kind of signal you would get from a star if it was surrounded by a Dyson sphere. A Dyson sphere is something speculated by a scientist called Freeman Dyson, who suggested that one of the signals you might be looking for one of the signals you might want to check for if you thought there might be an intelligent, a highly developed and futuristic by our standards, intelligent civilization at a star, is that they would build some kind of object in space, some kind of structure which would be in orbit around their star, not just around their planet, around their star. And it would be big enough to actually occlude some of the light of that star. And he called it a Dyson sphere. Maybe it could be used to gather energy from the star or something like that. And this is an illustration of what a Dyson sphere might look like surrounding the star. This is what you would see. This is the kind of signal that Tabby's star gave off. We don't know if there was a Dyson sphere there, but it's possible. And Boyajian had to admit it. So she's very, very careful to be very reluctant with that. And there is Tabby's star. Tabby's star actually is visible through binoculars. It's very, very dim, though. It's about 80 light years from the Earth, and so you would need one of those Daedalus craft to get there. Even that would take like thousands of years to get there. But well, it's still it's now been very, very carefully studied by all kinds of people. I'll skip that. But there's one thing missing. There's several things missing from the whole SETI scenario. And one of those is we're building these radio telescopes all over the place, and we've got massive computer banks studying transmissions from out there, waiting for a signal from another civilization out there to contact us. But, well, what's missing? We're listening, we're not talking. There's a bit of role utilitarianism here, because we're sitting there with these radio telescopes pointing at the sky. What if the aliens are doing the same? We're basically both sitting on the phone, not saying a word, waiting for the other person to speak. So, in November of 1974, a group of scientists, including Frank Drake, got together and decided to say hello. They actually got using a very, very large radio telescope in Puerto Rico called the Arecibo dish. It's a fixed dish. It's a huge single antenna dish, and you've probably seen pictures of it in Puerto Rico. And they decided to send a transmission to here. This is M13. It's a globular cluster. There's 150,000 stars there orbiting the Milky Way. It's 25,000 light years away, and they decided to send this signal. It's in binary code to that star system. And it was a bit tricky. Carl Sagan actually helped design this, because you have to you can't just speak to them in English or any Earth language, because they can't speak our language. So you have to communicate them non-linguistically. How would you communicate with another creature on another planet? And that's a subject I'll say a bit more about, because I think the task is far harder than they're claiming. But they decided to send these like pictures to see if they would work it out. Now, this is in binary code. That there is a key to binary code. It just explains how it works. And you have here, basically, a binary code illustration of the DNA molecule. There we see more of it. That's how it's arranged. These are the various chemicals of DNA. And here we have a human. We have a human figure there, and that's how big we are. That's how many of us there are, population. And this is where we come from. This is actually a binary illustration of the solar system. There's the sun, the three inner planets, the outer planets there, and Pluto there, which is no longer officially a planet. But you see the Earth is raised slightly up, that third rock from the sun there. And it's underneath the humans, hopefully indicating to the aliens that's where we're from. And at the bottom here that's the Arecibo dish, and that's the frequency of the transmission. That was sent to this star. Now, this cluster of stars, this globular cluster M13. Now, it's 25,000 light years away, which means it won't arrive for 25,000 years based on Einstein's relativity, the speed of light. What we know about it means if that is correct, then it'll take 25,000 years for the signal to get there. And if the aliens reply straight away, it'll be 50,000 years from the first transmission that we get a reply from them. So it will take 50,000 years just to say hello. That's the problem, and that's a big problem. But this was our first attempt to actually try and signal another alien, another civilization in our galaxy. There's M13 now. The search goes on. I mean, the SETI has recently had a boost. It's been funded by Yuri Milner, who's a Russian oligarch. he decided to pour several £billion into a massive project to try and work harder to find signals from out there in space. I think they're pretty close to success, if anything. Now, this is backed up by several people. There's Richard Branson, Elon Musk, and there's Professor Stephen Hawking there, you see, or one of his doubles. If you watch Rich Planet TV, you'll know that might not be the original Stephen Hawking. But basically, they're all behind this particular project. So it's all, I do feel like we're coming close. I mean, there's been several candidate signals recently, along with Tabby Star. There's been another, which I'm going to talk about. So we could be getting close, I think, to a big announcement that we have detected intelligent life out in the universe. But astronomy, radio astronomy and astronomy is not the only method used. Now, this here is called the Golden Disk, and it was actually placed aboard the Voyager spacecraft. And this here is this is actually a gramophone record made of gold alloy. And here is some instructions here, in pictorial language again, on how to actually create a system for actually playing the gramophone record, this little gramophone record. And anyone younger than me is going, what's that then? What's a gramophone? just imagine iTunes on a plastic party plate. Okay, that's a gramophone. But it's like tricky. Now this was Carl Sagan helped design this. And this is another one that was on the Pioneer space probe, which is another of these deep space missions. And you have here now this little star-shaped structure is actually stating where the Earth lies within the universe, because these lines here lead to pulsars, these particular things that were discovered by Susan Jocelyn Bell, the little green men things, right? And so that hopefully will tell the aliens where we are. I don't know what that is up there. But we have some human figures here next to the Pioneer spacecraft. This tells us what we look like and how big we are, because we're to scale next to the spacecraft. And this here tells the aliens where we are. See, there's the third rock from the sun, and there's the spacecraft coming from that. And hopefully, when the aliens pick that up, they'll be able to understand it. We don't know that, but Carl Sagan helped to design this. And there he is. Mr. Carl Sagan himself. Now, this chap has an odd attitude, which is very, very strange. It's to do with what he feels about UFOs. I'm just going to, I'll play it later, actually. I'll play a little clip of Carl Sagan talking about UFOs later, but it's quite amazing. Now, one of the problems with the SETI program that they have identified is what's known as the Great Silence, or Fermi's paradox. Now, this is Enrico Fermi. He was a famous physicist, and he was also very interested in SETI. And he was concerned because he actually said, well, the universe has been around for a long time. Earth is a fairly young planet, 3.7 billion years old. There are much older stars which will have much older planets orbiting them. So presumably, if there are alien civilizations out there, they have reached a level of much higher technology than us. They should be beaming us signals all the time. They should be turning up every day in their spaceships. So where are they? That's the question. And this is the problem. Despite everything I've said about the Drake equation, about how it's virtually certain there are massive numbers of civilizations, even quite close to the Earth out there, statistically, where are they? Well, ufology provides an answer for that, a very, very simple answer. Now, this is Fermi's diagram. This is an old planet here. So when the Earth is created, they've already revealed, they've already got to the point where Earth is now, so by there they should be millions of years ahead, but they're not there. They haven't arrived. But the truth of the matter is, they have. It's that simple. They're here. They've already arrived. But proponents of SETI are not interested in UFOs. UFO people all over the world are seeing. They're seeing these craft, which do not come from the Earth. They're being seen in space, coming towards the Earth. They land here. They interact with us. They're not human. They don't come from this planet. Yet, this is what Carl Sagan thinks about UFOs.
Since 1947, there have been hundreds of thousands of reports of UFOs, unidentified flying objects. This subject has more, I think, to do with religion and superstition than with science. That was the story told by Betty and Barney Hill, Virtually all scientists who've studied it are skeptical. But UFO enthusiasts think the Hill case is a classic example of a close encounter of the third kind. Why? The Hills' own psychiatrists described their story as a kind of dream. There's no corroborating evidence. The star map argument is worthless. And yet, this is one of the best attested cases of UFO close encounters. For all I know, we may be visited by a different extraterrestrial civilization every second Tuesday. But there's no support for this appealing idea. The extraordinary claims are not supported by extraordinary evidence. There are curious daylight photos of UFOs. Some look suspiciously like hats or hubcaps thrown into the air. Photos can be faked. More common are unidentified lights at night. They're often aircraft. But if we can't identify a light, that doesn't make it a spaceship. Most reports of unidentified flying objects turn out to be something else, like the refracted image of a bright planet or the re-entry of an artificial satellite. Some are psychological aberrations, some are hoaxes. Never is there any compelling physical evidence, a detailed close-up photograph of a strange spacecraft or a small device of extraterrestrial manufacture, or a book written in alien hieroglyphics. Never. There are reports of such things, but never the things themselves. Since Cosmos was first released, interest in UFOs has persisted. It seems to me that there are fewer sightings of strange objects in the skies these days, and more stories about personal encounters with alleged extraterrestrials, like the account of Betty and Barney Hill that we dramatized. There are still people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, or even sexually abused, or even impregnated by them. Best-selling, purportedly serious books have been written about such claims. But the critical fact remains that all we have still is just anecdote. There are no close-up photographs, no artifacts, nothing that would convince a skeptic. All there are is stories. And stories just aren't good enough on a matter of this importance. I'm still waiting for hard evidence. There's not a single verified or checked out report which is at all connectable with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. If you would believe, as the flying saucer cultists would have us believe, that the majority of the saucer reports are due to visitations, then you have a very strange situation. That means several spaceships are coming to the Earth over interstellar distances every day, as if all the anthropologists in the world were to converge on one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean because they just invented the fishnet there or something.
All right. Now, one thing that's interesting about that particular clip is that you see Carl Sagan talking about UFOs in 3 separate clips, all of them taken a long time apart from each other. There's one where he's a young man with the James Bond bad guy sitting beside him, you see. Well, we should throw him into a tank of sharks. You know. Then you see him in 1980 and during the Cosmos series, and then 10 years later, just a few years before he died as an older man, he never once changed his mind on UFOs. He said the same thing throughout his entire life. It can't be possible he could be that willfully ignorant. It's a denial. It's a state of denial. But there's another clip I want to show you here. I think I've got about half an hour left, so I'll just play you another clip here.
Dr. Seth Shostak is a world-renowned astronomer. He works for the SETI Institute, a scientific organization whose mission is to search the cosmos for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence.
What we try and do is trying to eavesdrop on signals that they might be sending our way.
Okay.
Just trying to hear ET's radio broadcasts. I'm sure there are a lot of planets out there that have plenty of life that's not very clever. Life that doesn't write great literature and doesn't build radio transmitters. But we're not going to hear from those guys.
No.
Our galaxy has 200 billion stars. It probably has 1 trillion planets. That's with a T.
Right.
That's a large number. Now, if this is the only planet where anything interesting is happening, that makes us a miracle.
Right.
And one thing you learn from studying astronomy is that every time you believe in miracles, you're wrong.
Like many scientists, Dr. Shostak thinks that alien life exists, but we just haven't seen it yet. So what does he think of Bridget's UFO encounter?
I had a close encounter in central Los Angeles, Brentwood, and it involved 45-foot craft.
But no pictures.
I was in shock.
Notice how they cut away. That's editing.
I think you would be also. You know, if I had a camera, I would still have someone ridicule me.
Can I ask, what about the craft made you think it was extraterrestrial?
It was nothing that I had seen before. It had no wings, it had no fuel.
Well, you said that, but you would have seen something like that in the movie.
Yeah, I've seen spaceships on TV. It's all children's TV channels now. Spaceships everywhere.
I think that if there were compelling evidence, yes, you would have tens of thousands of academics beavering away, working on that. If the evidence is poor, they're not going to waste their time. That's the thing. And the fact that they're not doing that means that the evidence is poor. There's not a very good case for alien visitation.
Dr. Shostak's views make complete sense to me. I wanted to ask the doctor, why do ordinary people like Bridget and Darren believe they've seen such extraordinary things?
There's something about a conspiracy that I think is very empowering. If you,
Shut
for
up.
example, think that we're being buzzed by alien spacecraft, and those pointy-headed, nerdy scientists down at the local university don't agree with you, you know something they don't know.
Yes.
And so there's something empowering about that.
It's a cachet.
Yeah, I think that's understandable.
God, that's annoying. It really is. It really is a pain, isn't it? Now, of course, that's completely and utterly false. Everything you just heard, hello. Everything you just heard is completely and totally false. And you only have to look at UFO and the UFO phenomenon, the research that's being done into it, the information that's out there with an open and rational mind for just 5 seconds, and you could see that this is complete nonsense. So why is it, even though the SETI proponents are basically looking for the same thing we are, they are so opposed to this idea? They say there's aliens out there. Yep, the aliens are out there. There's life on other planets, intelligent life, life which possibly is more sophisticated than ours, life that could build craft that could come here to Earth and meet us, the same way we're designing craft that could go to them and meet them. But on no account can they ever actually do it. That's the rule. If any evidence comes up to suggest they have done it, we have to ignore it. It's one of the most crazy, irrational things I've ever heard. I think it's time to trigger Matthew Williams. What do you reckon? Yeah. Now, this is a crop circle. This is an amazing crop circle that appeared in Chilbolton, right here in Hampshire, in 2001. And it's an amazing image, actually. It's like a dot matrix, like the old newspapers. And, well, I mean, Matthew, you know how these are made, I know. And so, somebody told me that, actually, when I last presented this talk, they said they knew who made this. I mean, it's quite possible. I'm very well aware that human activity does account for crop circles, at least a part of the phenomenon. But then this image appeared next to it a few days later. Now, here's a diagram of it. Now, this may look familiar to you. Oh, I see. This may look familiar to you. You've seen this already, haven't you? It's the Arecibo message. And it appeared at a crop circle in a field. But no, it's slightly different. It's in binary. But look, the DNA system here is slightly different here. And look at the image of the creature, where there was a human figure in the Arecibo message. That's not a human, is it? That's a grey alien. That's how big they are there. They're slightly smaller than humans. That's how many they are. And this is another planetary system, which is like the solar system diagram, but you have a star and you have some planets. And you see here they live on 4 of their planets. And those 4 in a circle might indicate the moons of a gas giant, for example. And there's more bigger planets here out there. This image here is completely unintelligible. But though a circle actually did appear in a field near there, which actually resembled that. A crop circle did appear there too. And there was this other beautiful image here. Now, there's actually a hidden message in that circular formation there, which I won't go into. It's a big message. But you get here like this grey alien here, which is a bit like that. Now, whoever is, or whatever is responsible for this is almost like a reply to the Arecibo message. It's as if someone picked up what was transmitted from the Puerto Rico, that place in Puerto Rico, and decided, I'm not going to wait 50,000 years for you. Come on, I'll talk to you now. Alternatively, of course, it could be just guys with planks. But I just thought that was worth showing. And what's interesting about that particular place, that field, Chilbolton, is that right next to us is this. This is the Chilbolton Radio Telescope. And this has been used as part of the SETI project. Now this here is Terence McKenna, who some of you are familiar with. I think, Niall, you've heard of him a few times. Now this guy, he's a big critic of SETI. And he actually did say at one point that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, the way it's being conducted, is a bit like pointing a radio telescope into the sky and expecting to see a good Italian restaurant. A slight exaggeration, but I know what point he's making. And this is where we come to the missing part, the missing factor of the Drake equation, FM, which I think should be added onto it. And M stands for mindset. You're dealing not only with life, intelligent life, life capable technologically of communicating, but life which is capable of communicating and has the mindset to do so. We're dealing with a situation, anthropomorphizing. We're kind of putting ourselves in the shoes of the aliens, which perhaps we shouldn't do, even if they do have 2 feet. It's kind of like we're making an assumption about the creatures out in space, which is, well, they're like us. They think like us. They're going to transmit on the hydrogen frequencies and the hydrogen line. They're going to use that channel because that's the channel we would use. But can we be so prodigal? I mean, look, we have trouble communicating with non-human species on this earth. If you've got a dog, I mean, your dog sometimes does things that you can't understand. There's a limited amount of communication. The dog will, if he's hungry, he'll let you know. If he wants to go out for a walk, he'll let you know. If a stranger comes to the house that he doesn't like, he'll let you know. And there's no doubt there is communication there between species. But very often, dogs and other animals will do things that we just don't understand. We don't understand because we're not dogs. We do a lot of things that they can't possibly comprehend as well. And that's the situation we may well be in. We may be the equivalent of dogs trying to communicate with humans when we're dealing with extraterrestrials out in space. It's not just the levels of intelligence. The fact is that we're more intelligent than dogs. It's the fact of the differences in mindset. We're dealing with a psychology that may not even be a brain as we know what a brain is. It's an intelligence that has evolved from the very, very tiniest scrap of early life, as was found in the Miller-Urey experiment, up to a sophisticated, intelligent organism. How can we possibly assume what it's going to be like? I mean, as Ludwig Wittgenstein, who was a philosopher, who was also incidentally a hospital porter, he said, if a lion could speak, we still could not understand him. And that's very true. And Terence McKenna understood this. So there we do. That is an issue that we have to cope with. That is an obstacle that we are going to have to overcome, and it's something we already are facing. It's an obstacle we're already facing because I believe humans are already having contact with extraterrestrial intelligences, and there's already signs that they are acting in a way which indicates that there is this obstacle that exists. Now, do you see the subliminal message, it's not subliminal? Do you see the hidden message in this little slide? These radio telescopes are pointing up at the sky. They're searching for signals from aliens millions of light years away. But look, there's an alien hovering just above them there, and they're ignoring it. They're turned away from it. And this is a metaphor for how people like Seth Shostak, Carl Sagan, all these other people, Jill Tarter, Frank Drake, their rejection of the UFO phenomenon is symbolic of it. And it's so foolish. It's right there, and they're ignoring it. And of course, the question then arises, we have to go there, don't we? Could there be a cover-up? Maybe the government is actually suppressing information. The SETI movement, the scientists, have actually discovered lots of signals from aliens, but the government are covering it up because they don't want to know. Now, this is a perfectly reasonable thing to wonder. It's a perfectly reasonable question. Because the government do cover up evidence of extraterrestrial life. I've written 2 books about that. Lots of other people have written books about it. It's undeniable. But SETI is slightly different from the UFO phenomenon in the sense that its relationship to the powers that be and the implications of any form of cover-up are different. They're extremely different. So, for example, to have a politician say, look, we've discovered a signal from some star out there. It's 10 light years from Earth, and it's an intelligent signal from another world. That's very, very different to saying there are craft that have visited the Earth. They've crashed, and we actually retrieved and we salvaged the wreckage of an alien spacecraft 70 years ago, and we back-engineered its technology. And we forgot to tell you. Sorry. The political implications of those two statements are entirely different. So, covering up SETI, even though there is a reason to believe there might be cover-ups of alien life, is different from covering up the UFO phenomenon, when the government know more about UFOs than they're saying. This is the emblem of the Brookings Institute. In 1959, the Brookings Institute released a document where they advised both NASA and the Soviet Space Agency that if they came across evidence of extraterrestrial life, especially intelligent extraterrestrial life, even if it was intelligent life from the past that no longer existed, it wouldn't be a good idea to shout it from the rooftops. They didn't specifically say there should be a cover-up, but they did say there would be problems with the way people would react. The population would respond to the fact that we're not just this tiny little oasis in this infinite cosmic desert of carbon compounds and noble gases and fusing plasma and dust. We're not that. Because it seems to be quintessential to the rulers of this planet and our relationship with them that we do believe that. We believe that falsehood. So they did actually say that, and I think that might be one of the reasons why when UFOs crash to the Earth, there is this cover-up. Now, look, this is the face on Mars and all kinds of other things. I'll skip that, going into that in detail, but this is an example of exactly what the Brookings Institute was talking about. Even before the first human went into space, just after Sputnik, they were saying, if you find anything like this, signs of organized structures on a planet in the solar system, it's best not to talk about it. However, there is a protocol for dealing with, if they've negotiated a protocol with governments, if something is detected. For example, if any individual detects a signal, verify evidence, inform other observers in the SETI movement. Is that the girl I met in the pub earlier? Tell her I'll call her back. Inform all other observers within the SETI movement so you can confirm it. Don't go public straight away. Inform an organization with a wonderful name. It's the Central Bureau for Astronomical Telegrams. It's part of the International Astronomical Union. And then you can disseminate it through scientific channels to the media. And there's going to be, and people involved in this, who've agreed to this protocol, must not reply to the signal unless it's without due process. In other words, don't say anything back to the aliens. If they say "come in peace," don't necessarily believe them. But we've got to look at, when it comes to the cover-up of SETI, we've got to look at the practicalities of it. The difference between a signal coming from outer space and a crash retrieval, for example, are a completely different matter, not just in their political implications, but in the flows of information and the way information is contained. To cover up a crash retrieval is very simple compared to this, because you can simply seal off the area, get rid of the evidence, and pretend nothing happened. What we're dealing with SETI is a movement that includes a massive network of observatories all over the world, radio observatories, visual observatories, space telescopes and things like that, involving thousands upon thousands of people everywhere. Not only that, but there's millions of amateur astronomers involved in this as well. Astronomy remains one of the most popular hobbies in the world, and because of the internet, they now have access to much, much more data than they would have previously before. What I'm saying is, I believe that a cover-up of a signal from outer space detected by the search for extraterrestrial intelligence would not be possible. I think it's too much of a top-heavy conspiracy. Astronomy is the world's only truly democratic science. The data is above our heads. Anyone can see it. You can't cover that up. So we may well see this, or maybe Trump, or knowing him, it'll be on Twitter first, won't it? Yeah. I believe I have information that we have detected a signal. Now that is one meme I do hope will go viral very, very soon, because these people, Bryce Zabel, who co-wrote AD After Disclosure with Richard Dolan, he called disclosure the science is 9/11, and he's absolutely right. There is no way on earth people like this will ever be able to spin their way out of what they've done and what they've said. Because some of them will try. Some of them will say, "Well, but I believed you all along." Yes, I did. No. We've got him, this chap, Professor Brian Cox, we've got him numerous times ridiculing and dismissing the evidence that we presented. And when there is some kind of revelation, he will not be able to back out of it. And they will have the massive egg on their faces, and they're going to owe us a huge apology. I think some of them will simply retire just to get out of that. They really will. Now, but the thing about it is that now there is this gulf, as I've said, between the search for extraterrestrial intelligence and ufology. There's this difference, there's this rejection on the part of SETI for ufology. Now, it's not reciprocated. There's no one I've known in ufology who think that SETI is stupid, it's a waste of time. None of them have ever said that. It's the people within SETI that say ufology is a waste of time because it's dealing with a non-issue. It's chasing a phantom. But I believe that an announcement from the official sources that we have detected an intelligence signal from out in space, which is going to happen. It's only a matter of time. As I said, it's a statistical certainty, and we have the technology now to do it. So it's only a matter of time before those big computer banks have done their job, and they've processed the information, and it's there ready to be, it's been confirmed, and it is ready for publication. It's only a matter of time before that happens. And then, as I said, the announcement that there's a signal coming from Zeta Reticuli or something is not the same as a craft from Zeta Reticuli landing on the White House lawn. It's two totally different things. But it could have a knock-on effect that will benefit ufology. Because it will mean people will start turning their eyes skywards, and they'll start turning their minds skywards. And even though we're part of a field which is separate from SETI, I believe that mindset, the mindset of being aware of something out there, will make people think more and more about UFOs, what UFOs are, and the possibility that perhaps the signal that has been found is simply just one of a plethora of other evidence out there, including the evidence that we are actually being visited. Now, there's a lot more of information about this, and you can find it on my website here, Apanwo, Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. Now, if you go there, you'll find there's lots of written material in the blogs. I do a radio show every week. I have a YouTube channel, and I've also written some fiction. It's a multimedia experience. And this is one of the books I've written, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure. If you are into UFOs, crash retrievals, Roswell, exopolitics of any kind, that's the book for you, because it's a fictional allegory, but I think I communicate an important message with it. And I've just actually published... Oh, I'm sorry. Ignore that. That's... All right. Okay, ignore that. I've actually published a sequel. I've just published a sequel, and which you find... It's all on that little stall over there. The first one, Roswell Rising, is £9. The Roswell Revealed is £10. I'll sell you them both for £15. And so grab a copy of that, and I hope you enjoy the books. And I hope you've enjoyed what I've said today. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Hmm.